Locked in a trade fight with Donald Trump, you may have heard that the Carney government is reconsidering its multi-billion-dollar purchase of American F-35.
Expanding our plan to invest in the Canadian Armed Forces, to modernize our military equipment and technology, to help build up our own defense and security industries, as well as to diversify our defense partnerships. With the review of the F-35, we expect to complete by the end of the summer. If we need, we'll take all the time necessary, no more, and we'll go from there.
The review of the F-35 acquisition project continues. It is one that is going to take the time it's going to take.
Tonight, Canada is facing a question that no amount of patriotic branding or glossy defense brochures can answer. A question that doesn't come from political opponents, activists, or foreign rivals. It comes from the very system Canada has trusted for decades. Because when a country spends $19 billion on national defense, it isn't just buying aircraft, it's buying trust, reliability, and long-term security. And tonight, that trust is under serious strain. For years, Canadians were told this decision was settled, that the path was locked in, that the future of Canada's Air Force was already written. 88 F-35 fighter jets. No debate. No alternatives worth considering. No serious reason to question it. The assumption was simple. This is how modern defense works. You align with the system that leads the world, and you accept the costs that come with it. But that assumption is now breaking down, because the conversation has quietly shifted from performance to accountability, from technology to systems, from aircraft specifications to something much more uncomfortable: whether the institutions behind this program can actually be trusted. What changed wasn't a protest. It wasn't a political scandal in Ottawa. It wasn't even a new threat abroad. What changed was a document. A document released in Washington that exposed a reality Canada can no longer afford to ignore. For the 8th consecutive time, the U.S. Department of Defense failed its own financial audit. Not narrowly, not on technicalities, completely. And buried inside that failure was something that should concern every country tied to America's most expensive weapons program. The Pentagon cannot accurately account for the global spare parts pool that supports the F-35 fleet. Think about that for a moment. The spare parts system, the backbone of operational readiness, the very mechanism that determines whether aircraft can be maintained, repaired, and deployed when it matters most. According to the auditors, the Department of Defense cannot verify what exists, where it is, or what it's worth. This isn't an abstract accounting issue. This isn't paperwork. This is the supply chain that Canada's future fighter fleet would depend on during a crisis. For years, Canada was told that participation in this global system was a strength. That shared logistics would reduce costs, improve efficiency, guarantee access. But what happens when the system itself can't be verified? What happens when the partner managing it cannot demonstrate basic control over its own assets? That question has now reached the highest levels of government. In Ottawa, behind closed doors, a different conversation has begun. Not emotional, not ideological, strategic, calculated, and deeply uncomfortable for those who assumed the decision was untouchable. Because this is no longer about whether the F-35 is a capable aircraft. By most measures, it is. This is about whether the institutions responsible for sustaining it over the next 4 decades are capable of delivering reliability, transparency, and accountability. And the warning signs are stacking up. In 2024, every single F-35 delivered was late. Not some, not most. Every one. The average delay was nearly 8 months. A dramatic collapse from the year before. The reason wasn't weather, it wasn't labor shortages. It was systemic failure tied to a modernization program that is now billions over budget and years behind schedule. At the same time, contractors continued to receive incentive payments, even when deadlines were missed, even when delivery targets weren't met. The structure of the program allowed bonuses for lateness. That isn't efficiency. That isn't partnership. That is dysfunction baked into the system. And when systems reward failure, allies pay the price. Canada's commitment represents a fraction of the total cost, but it is locked into the same consequences. When deliveries slip, Canadian squadrons wait. When software upgrades stall, pilots fly with limitations. When spare parts can't be tracked, readiness becomes a question mark. This is what defense dependence looks like when the system at the center stops functioning properly. And here's the part that matters most. Canada is no longer the only country asking these questions. Across Europe and beyond, allies are reassessing assumptions they once treated as unchangeable. Countries that traditionally defaulted to American platforms are now looking elsewhere. Not out of hostility, not out of ideology, out of necessity. Some have already canceled plans. Others are reviewing contracts under political and economic pressure. Others are quietly shifting future orders toward alternatives that offer something increasingly rare in modern defense procurement: predictable costs, reliable delivery, and transparent supply chains. This isn't an anti-American movement. It's a pro-sovereignty one. And that distinction matters. Because sovereignty isn't about rejecting alliances. It's about ensuring that partnerships are built on competence, not habit. On reliability, not momentum. On systems that function when tested, not narratives that collapse under audit. This is where Canada's leadership approach becomes important. The current review underway isn't driven by outrage, it's driven by calculation. The same mindset that pushed trade diversification when global supply chains became weapons. The same mindset that reduced exposure to single-point dependencies when volatility increased. The same mindset that understands resilience comes from options, not blind commitment. That's why alternatives are being discussed. Not as replacements overnight, but as components of a diversified strategy. Platforms that may not promise everything, but deliver what they promise. Aircraft backed by institutions that can pass audits. Supply chains that can be traced. Costs that don't double after contracts are signed. Europe's defense industry isn't winning attention because it's trendy. It's gaining traction because it's functioning. Contracts are being fulfilled. Timelines are being met. Transparency is being demonstrated, not promised. And while Washington struggles to account for its own inventory, other partners are stepping forward with clarity.